Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for the Paws and Petals event. For over 30 years, the human-animal bond in Colorado, HABIC, has been a proud part of the CSU School of Social Work and the College of Health and Human Sciences. Our mission is to improve the quality of life for people of all ages through the therapeutic benefits of companion animals, with a special focus on community outreach, teaching, and research. To learn more about HABIC or how you can get involved, please visit our website, habic.org. And now, without further delay, please welcome Alison O'Connor and Dr. Khursheed Mama from the Larimer County Master Gardeners Association.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much, Rebecca, for that great introduction. My name is Alison O'Connor. I am the horticulture specialist for CSU Extension in Larimer County. I've been with Extension for 20 years, and if you're not sure what Extension is, we're the outreach arm of the university, and so we're here to answer questions about gardening or preserving food, and I work with the Larimer County Master Gardeners, and they are a great group of volunteers who work with homeowners to help you solve your horticultural mysteries. And today, both Khursheed and I are going to be talking about pet-friendly landscaping. So as master gardeners, as the horticulture specialists, we actually get a lot of questions about making sure that pets are safe in the landscape. And so I'll speak first, and then Khursheed, with the veterinarian perspective, will speak second. And we will take your questions at the end. So don't hesitate to ask them, and we'll get to them as best we can. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I want to point out that CSU is an equal opportunity access and non-discrimination university. If there's anything we can do to accommodate your needs, please let us know. Type it in the chat, type it in the Q&A. This presentation is being recorded, and so if you need to go back and review any slides or you want to rewatch something, you can absolutely go ahead and do that. What I will cover today are the following, and we only have about a half an hour each, so it's not a lot of time, but we'll try to cram in as much information as possible. So we'll talk a little bit about pets in the landscape, a little bit about design. I am not a landscape designer, that's full disclosure, but I do have some things for you to consider, whether you have current pets or whether maybe you're going to be adding pets to your family. About some things that you can do. We'll talk about lawn care because that's probably the biggest thing, especially when it comes to dogs. Mention pesticide use and using those appropriately in the landscape with our kids and pets, and then other things just to be aware of. So the first question is, well, how do we integrate our pets and people together in our landscapes? And I am the proud mom of two beagles. And right now I have Maple and Juniper. So you will see previous beagles that we have owned. And if I know who the dogs are, I will be sure to, I have a little bit of a mention of who they are. I have some of my brother's dogs too. But anyway, proud beagles. And if you've owned a beagle or a hound, you know that you have to be smarter than they are. So some things is when you get a pet, especially if you're bringing a new pet into your landscape, it's really good to watch them, identify maybe what they're doing, because their behaviors are going to be different than previous pets that you've had. So Maple the beagle, the one in the front, she is the chewer. She has tried to break through our wood fence so much that we actually had to reinforce it. So you will have different habits with different pets. And our pets use our landscapes all year round. They're the ones who have to go outside to use the bathroom. They're the ones who are obviously on squirrel duty. And so making a space that's accommodating them is really, really important. So keep an eye on them, watch them. Are they doing patrol around the perimeter of the yard? Are they mostly just going off the patio to do their business and then coming back inside? And so just taking an idea of what they're doing and then incorporating that into your current landscape plans is a really good recommendation. As part of the design, a site analysis is really just observing behaviors. So you need to think like your pet. So I have to think like a beagle. So I am focused on food. I am focused on the squirrels. I also have backyard chickens, and so I need to make sure that they are safe. And so I have a lot of things that I need to do in my own landscape. Then you think about plant selection, you think about places for them to play, you think about areas for them to recreate. And so a site design really sets up all of these things that you can also consider. Is your dog or cat, do they like to play? Do they like to run? Do they like to dig? Do you need space just set aside for them to dig and do their dog things? Are they just loungers? The beagles actually are quite lazy and they are friends with everything that comes into the yard, but they spend most of their time sunning on the mulch areas. Also, what kind of pets do you have? When I talk to people about lawn care, either converting a lawn or trying to renovate maybe what they have, the first question I ask is, do you have dogs or kids that are using the lawn? Because a big dog, a golden retriever, is going to have much different needs than a smaller dog like a Chihuahua or maybe more of a lap dog. How many dogs do you have? Do you have a pack? Do you just have one? What are the ages? Is it more of a senior dog who maybe doesn't have as much activity as it once did? So those are all things that you can consider too. And then, with other animals that you might be considered as pets, maybe you have goats, maybe you have chickens, maybe you have other species that I'm not even considering. Think about their needs and also what they need in their life. And then there might be some breed specific things to consider as well. So this is just a graphic of how you can make bubble forms of your landscape. So areas for the dogs to play. Maybe you have a dog run. Maybe there's a special place for your vegetable garden that's fenced off from all of your pets because you know that dogs, cats, chickens, they're nosy and they might get into that. So make a bubble plan and then kind of adapt your landscape accordingly. Now, getting into more of the specifics of landscape and how the materials that you could use, the first thing that comes to mind is mulch. Now, mulch by definition is just anything that's going to cover the soil surface. In a vegetable garden, grass clippings are used as mulch or straw. In the landscape setting, we have various types. We have the organic mulches, which are generally wood chips or arborist chips or something that decomposes. And then we have the non-organic, like the rock, pea gravel, squeegee, and those kind of things. So mulch is just a surface covering, and you need to find a mulch that works best for you. Now, mulch for your plants, because you're incorporating plants into your landscape, mulch for plants is a really important factor because we live in a dry climate. We get weed pressure, we lose a lot of moisture from the soil. And so something to cover the soil surface to prevent evaporation is going to be a good thing. And organic mulch and plants just go hand in hand. So think of the forest and think of the duff layer. All of those pine needles and the bark that falls to the ground, it decomposes and it enriches the soil. So wood mulch is a good thing for plants. Now we know that there are downfalls to wood mulch because we have wind. We just got through like 2 weeks of wind where the mulch blew everywhere. Maybe you live in a fire prone area and wood mulch isn't a good suggestion there, but you do need to find a mulch that works for you. When it comes to the inorganic mulches, like our rocks, river rock might be a good option. They tend to be more smooth, and so dogs and cats can walk on it without hurting their paws. Squeegee, that might be something you haven't heard of, but if you think of like crusher fines or crushed rock, it's often used for pathways, then it kind of compacts down. That could be used as a mulch. Might be a great mulch if you're doing more of a xeric or a waterwise landscaping. Pea gravel, it's an option, but it tends to be very slippery. And so if you've used pea gravel with any depth, you'll notice that your ankles kind of wobble and turn. And if your ankles are doing that, that means your paws or your pet's paws are also maybe not as stable. And then I would discourage using granite or anything, any rock that tends to have really sharp angles on it. Not fun to walk on for you or your pets, and it could cause injury as well. In your landscape, if you have dogs, especially that are on constant patrol, so the beagles, there's Juniper the beagle. This was this morning. She was on squirrel duty. She had to make sure and check all of her spaces to make sure that, no cats overnight or the squirrels overnight did anything. But if you have these, what we used to call cow paths, I'll call them dog paths. If you have these runs in your yard and it's just really hard to maintain the grass area or keep vegetation in place, it might be a good idea to just put down some wood mulch. So in our landscape, we're taking areas out of grass. We still have an area for the dogs to play, but all along the fence and mulched up to the point of where the trees are located, as you can see, we have a pretty wide mulch bed. So the dogs, believe it or not, the dogs actually use the mulch to do their business more often than they use the grass. So they go out, they do their patrol, they have their pathways that they follow, and then they do their business as well. So the mulch is actually a really nice surface for dogs to use, but again, it does have its limitations. Looking at some other landscape materials like pavers, we call these the hardscape materials. So rock could be considered a hardscape as well. But these include our patio pavers, flagstone, concrete, wood decking. All of those things are probably a part of your landscape. And when you're installing those things or have them existing in your current backyard or front yard, you'll want to think about heat retention. You'll want to think about slipperiness when wet. So having a really smooth flagstone surface, it might be really slippery for you and your pet. So also think about what it's like if there is moisture on it or snow and ice, which we also get. Also think about how you're going to remove snow and ice. So if you're out shoveling or there's areas that you need to maintain for your pets to make sure that they can get access to the backyard, also make sure that it's a surface that is easy to remove that might not need a lot of de-icing salts or other things, which we'll discuss just in a little bit. Landscape edging. I don't love it. I know that it has a purpose, and I really see issues, especially with the metal landscape edging. First of all, it's really hard to install. And so if you've ever tried to install metal landscape edging, you know that you are battling a beast. Second of all, it does take some maintenance. And the problem is that when we mow around it or we try to maintain things around it, sometimes equipment can snag on the metal edging and actually pull it out of the ground. And then you have this unfinished piece of metal with really, really sharp edges that can be really, really dangerous. For pets' paws, so remember your dog or your cat, as they go outside, they are focused on whatever catches their eye, whether it's an animal in the yard or you're out in the yard. So they're going to bolt out of the door. And if you have metal edging where it could maybe catch their paw, it could actually slice paws. And Khursheed could probably speak to this as a veterinarian, but I know that injuries do happen from metal edging and just catching the tender part of the pad of the paw. So be very careful. So the photo above is actually Hazel the beagle, and you can see how tall that metal edging is. It wasn't installed properly, but you can see how tall it is and how her little foot could actually be damaged by that. Other alternatives to metal edging, there are plastic types. There are types that have more of a rounded top. So if you do need to use edging to separate spaces, just make sure that you're selecting one that's easy to install, number one, that fits in your budget, and then also is safer for your pets. You can actually also create barriers just using mulch. And so a thick layer of mulch, and when we talk about the depth of mulch, we're talking usually 4 to 5 inches thick. And so if you've had mulch failure, where the mulch doesn't stay in place or it tends to blow, or gets kicked out because of your pets, it might not be a deep enough layer. So maybe add some, especially if it's wood mulch, add some depth to that, and it tends to settle and stay in place a little bit more. So you can actually use your mulch to separate those spaces from the grass, from a pathway, and then you can also use other things like brick pavers or concrete blocks. You can use larger rocks to do this. All of this takes maintenance. All of this takes effort. So find something, again, that works for you. But just know that edging as a whole can be a dangerous thing to your pet. Let's move into lawn care. So a lot of questions, I'm sure, on how to deal with the dog spots in your yard. There's Lizzie, my chicken. So dealing with dog spots, and we'll also talk about species, turf species that are more resistant to urine damage. And then we'll talk also about pesticide use. Dog urine injury, there is a myth out there that dog urine is only caused by female dogs because they squat. For those of you who own male dogs, if you actually watch your dog, I bet you notice that your male dog will squat in their own landscape as well. So it's not based on the gender of the dog. It's actually based more on how much urine is deposited at one time when the dog goes. So if you have a bigger dog, a lab, a Great Dane, you're going to have a larger amount of urine deposited compared to a toy poodle. So it doesn't matter if your dog is male or female. I have seen female dogs lift their leg. I have seen male dogs squat. But what's really interesting is that it's often thought that it's the salts in the urine that is causing the burning or the brown spots that you're getting. So urine does contain urea, and urea is nitrogen. And so you do see that greening response. So you can see those greener circles around the brown spot. So you'll get a little bit of urea response. This is a good indicator if you need to fertilize your lawn, because if you see dog spots all over after a winter, it's a good sign that you might need to fertilize. But the actual damage from the urine is thought to be linked to an herbicidal-like ingredient in the urine called lactic acid. Now you're like, I've heard of lactic acid. When I work out and my muscles are sore, I need to get the lactic acid out of my body, right? Same thing. When we urinate, or when pets urinate, animals, rabbits, foxes, when they urinate, they have lactic acid in the urine, and that actually is thought to be the cause of the browning. Salts are part of urine. So it's a complicated factor, but just know that it is usually a two-part thing. So there's the salt thing and there's the lactic acid thing. So what do? You follow your dog around with a bucket of water, and every time they urinate on your turf, you are going to then try to leach that from the system. Now, that's ridiculous. We can't usually do that. A couple things you could do that are a little more practical is, one, try to teach your dog to go in one spot. So maybe have a potty area, or try to encourage them to use the mulch or the rock that's in the landscape as opposed to the lawn. The other thing you could try to do is actually irrigate just a little bit more. So if you have an area that's showing signs of dog spots, and we see this most often after winter because dogs are lazy. It's cold out. They run outside, they do their business, they run back inside, and they don't want to spend time when it's too cold outside. So if you have issues after the winter, you could try to water those areas a little bit more and try to leach some of the salts and lactic acid from the soils themselves. But really, trying to train your dogs to go in an area is probably the best solution. Moving into the turf species. So a lot of our lawns are going to be Kentucky bluegrass, and Kentucky bluegrass has a ton of benefits to it. I am very pro-turf. I am a person who likes to have a lawn for her dogs to play and recreate on. So turf does have a place in the landscape, especially when we're working with our pets. But Kentucky bluegrass, as a grass that's tolerant to some of the dog urine, not the best grass. So if you are having dog spot issues, for cool season turf, these are the grasses that are greening up now. They start to green up usually about the middle of March, and they stay green well until November. For our cool season friends, grasses like tall fescue, the fine fescues, and perennial ryegrass are going to be the most salt tolerant. Perennial ryegrass also happens to look very similar to Kentucky bluegrass. And so if you have dog spots, you could buy some perennial ryegrass seed, poke holes into those dog spot areas, and then seed some perennial ryegrass and get it to germinate. So it just has a better tolerance. For our warm season grasses, these actually happen to be pretty tolerant to salts and urine as a whole. So Bermuda grass, saltgrass, those are both great species that can tolerate not only wear and traffic play, but they can also tolerate the urine damage as well. A couple other things, looking at traffic tolerance, we talked about urine tolerance, but looking at traffic tolerance. So let's say you have 2 active kids, you have 3 active dogs, and they are just destroying the backyard. You have mud, you have bare spots. What species do you put in? So I actually have this conversation a lot with people. And so when we're looking at traffic tolerance for the cool season species, Kentucky bluegrass at the top. The great thing about bluegrass is that it tends to recover from play. It grows via rhizomes. And so when it gets some regular fertilizer and maybe a little bit more water, it's actually going to regenerate itself. So Kentucky bluegrass is a really good traffic tolerant grass. And it's also really tolerant of most things, just can't handle the urine as much. Perennial ryegrass is a good species, and tall fescue. Now for warm season, you may have heard of this wonder grass called dogtuff. It was actually an introduction from the Plant Select program, which is part of CSU Extension. And dogtuff is a type of Bermuda grass. Here's the thing about Bermuda grass. All of the Bermuda grasses are not only traffic tolerant, but they're also very salt tolerant as well. So dogtuff as a lawn grass, it can work. It's maybe not the most attractive. A more attractive option that actually looks more like a lawn, that is used frequently for sports turf, is called Tahoma 31. So this is a Bermuda grass. It uses about half the water as Kentucky bluegrass, and all of the Bermuda grasses are going to be lower water users. But there are nicer lawn types available. But just know that all the Bermudas can tolerate the traffic, and they can tolerate the salts as well. Buffalo grass, blue grama, they're not as tolerant to the traffic. So if you have just a small dog and not a lot of play, those will work. But again, if you have a really active backyard, you'll want to pick a species accordingly. When we use pesticides and fertilizers, so this is all in one category, and pesticides include herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, those are all the sides, so they are grouped together as pesticides. What you need to do is read the label in its entirety. And I could probably challenge you that most people don't read the label in its entirety, but that's the most important thing. The label is the law. And when you buy a product and you apply it, they are assuming that you read the label and that you are applying it correctly. It's actually a federal law, so make sure that you are reading the label. As you apply those products, whether it's a pesticide, whether it's a fertilizer, make sure that all the kids, all the pets are inside. If you're spraying something, put the chickens in their coop. Just make sure that only you are the one outside doing the application. Remove any toys that they might have. If you have outside food bowls and dishes, make sure that you're removing that. And then with fertilizers, every fertilizer that you applied needs to be watered in. So let either the product you sprayed dry in its entirety, and the label will tell you how long it needs to dry before re-entry can occur. But fertilizers also need to be watered in. And then keep your products out of reach of your kids and pets. Keep them in sealed containers, put them on a shelf, keep them in a spot that your pets don't go, just to take that extra step. If you do think that you have a potential poisoning that occurs, do contact either the National Pesticide Information Center. You can contact the ASPCA Poison Control, your local vet, the CSU Veterinary School. The thing is you need to know what the product is. So have it in front of you with the label, and then you can relay that information to them. But just know that those individuals are on call to assist you if something happens and goes awry. A couple other plant hazards to mention, anything with spines and thorns. So you may have had an encounter with puncture vine or goat heads, cacti, yucca, agave. These are not pet-friendly plants for the landscape. So there's a lot of weeds and there's a lot of plants that you might encounter. And Khursheed is going to address this a little bit later. And then addressing your pet's behaviors, whether they are endearing, whether they are naughty, however you want to define them. Training, treats, more training, more treats. So beagles, as you know, hounds are super stubborn. They have a mind of their own. They have a personality of their own. And believe it or not, the little beagles are very food motivated. So we have found a way to try to work with the beagles, work with trainers to make sure that we are addressing some of their not so desirable behaviors. If it's not working, you could use exclusion techniques, which basically means you keep the pet out of a space. So if you have raised beds and they're going in there and digging them up, maybe fence off the raised bed area. There are sprays and liquid deterrents that you can use. Some are not very good smelling, so you might apply like coyote urine. There's maybe some other products. Whatever you do, make sure that they're safe for pets. You don't want to hurt your pet or harm them. You're trying to train them to do the right thing. And then also know that after rain or irrigation, you'll likely have to reapply those. One thing I have found, this is just a personal thing, is Maple the Beagle really likes the fragrance of plants. She loves to roll in anything that's minty or might have a good smell. And so new plants that go into the landscape get a tomato cage put around them to prevent her from rolling on them. I just bought some catmint plants over the weekend, and Maple the Beagle tried to take a nosedive and roll on the catmint. So I know that I'm going to probably have to buy some more tomato cages, but this is just a form of deterrent that you can use. If you have nosy pets, Maple the Beagle is a perfect example. She likes to root in things. She likes to sniff her way through things. Get your plants off the ground. So use raised beds, use containers, use something, because even that 18 inches of lift off the ground is going to help deter them from doing the behavior that you don't want them to do. So, I mean, Mabel, she's a great dog. I adore her to pieces. She's the one. We always have that dog that teaches us all the lessons, and she is the one. If you have cats or other neighborhood cats using your raised beds as a litter box, do something where it's uncomfortable for their paws. You don't want to hurt them, but you could put down hardware cloth or chicken wire. They have these scat mats that you can actually buy in their little pokey things. I mean, I wouldn't want to step on that. I'm thinking it's like stepping on Legos. It would be really, really uncomfortable. And then you can also try some of the repellents as well. So exclusion techniques are the most probably number one, and then you can try some other things as well. If you have a compost bin, make sure that it is sealed, make sure that it is out of pet's way, because you know that dogs are nosy. They are going to go and root for things. Neighborhood raccoons might go in there. And so we don't want to introduce any sort of disease or other things. We don't want to make our pets sick. So if you are composting, that's great. Just make sure it's out of the way. Make sure it's in its own location, preferably in a sealed container if you can. But if you're doing the 3-bin technique, just make sure that it is not accessible to your pets. And just a note, don't compost your pet waste. For home composting, our home compost just doesn't usually get hot enough. It needs to be held at a very high temperature. And we, as home gardeners, are just not consistent enough to keep it at that high temperature to kill all the potential pathogens in pet waste. So put pet waste in your trash, and then, keep your compost to just your kitchen scraps and things like that. But no meat, no fats in your compost, because those can attract animals that you don't want in your landscape. And just to wrap up, a couple other hazards to avoid. This is not to scare you, just to keep you aware. Electrical cords, other wires. Maple the Beagle has chewed her fair share of extension cords in our yard. If you're using baits or poisons or traps for mice or voles in your landscape, make sure that your pets aren't getting into those. You don't want secondary contact poisoning occurring. With mouse traps, we had a beagle growing up that tried to lick the peanut butter. Poor Bosley, he got in a lot of trouble. He was fine, but you just don't want to cause injury to your pets as well. So make sure you keep all of that out of harm's way. And really, it's best not to use baits and poisons where animals are located. Keep pets indoors when you're mowing, string trimming. Cover your egress windows, because if you found that cute little baby rabbit that fell in, or the poor toads, oh, I hate when I see the toads, your pet could fall in as well. And then make sure that you cover your irrigation valve boxes, those green things that are either in the lawn or in the landscape. If you're doing some work, make sure that when you're finished that you do cover it up. And just to wrap it up before I toss it over to Khursheed, snow and ice removal and de-icing salts. If you can, avoid using these where your pets are going to be located. First of all, salts, they hurt. So if your little paws, if the paws and the pads have any sort of open wounds, salt getting into wounds is going to be painful. And your pet's response is going to be to lick their paws. And so they might then lick and ingest some of the de-icing salts, which is not a good thing. De-icing salts also contain chloride, and the cheapest form that we're probably using is sodium chloride. Sodium chloride is not a good thing. That's basically table salt. We don't want to use that near plants because it can cause damage. It can erode metal. It can actually erode some concrete. So not a great solution. So around plant areas, around pet areas, maybe use sand or kitty litter, something for the traction. And then de-icing salts are not used to melt ice. They are used to provide traction. So be very, very sparing in how you use those. One of the pet-friendly alternatives on the market is magnesium acetate, but it's crazy expensive. So you might buy that and use it for very special areas, but it's not going to be something that you would use on a regular basis. So find something that works to provide the traction, and then sweep it up after the snow and ice have melted. And so I will end here, and Khursheed is up next from the veterinary perspective. Thanks, Khursheed.
Thank you. Perfect. And then once you unshare, I will try to share my contents. Okay. All right. Can everybody see that with just the slide on the screen? Hoping?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, perfect. So thanks, Alison, for getting us started. What a great job. And I always learn something when Alison's talking, or I'm reminded of things like lactic acid. Anyway, my part, I am a Colorado Master Gardener. I've been with the program many years, and I'm also a veterinarian. Now, I will admit that my specialty is actually anesthesiology and not this topic of keeping pets safe in the landscape. But as a veterinarian, I have had experience with some of this. So no conflict of interest to disclose for this talk, but I did want to acknowledge that pictures are from multiple sources, including the internet, and so they're not intended to be shared beyond this presentation. I also like to say when I'm being recorded, sometimes in the heat of a moment, you might say something and then you may not have a chance to correct it. So if something, when you listen to the recording, sounds weird, make sure to verify that. Okay. So my background, I grew up in a very densely populated city, and dogs were fairly common as a pet, and cats were not very popular. And this was interesting because we didn't have yards, and most people lived in high rises with very limited open space. So you had to walk your dog. And while there is a picture of a dog walker up there on the right corner, this wasn't typical at the time. The other thing where I grew up, there were many stray animals, so that was probably my first experience with safety for animals, and not necessarily in the landscape, but the streetscape. And we did have cows on the street and an occasional pig, and so disease transmission was common. Of course, being hit by a vehicle was another thing that could happen, but a lot of tick and flea infestation, and so the jump from the stray to the domestic dog, in addition to potentially dog fights. So that probably my first experience. Now here in Colorado, we don't typically live in high rises, although some do. It is more typical for us to have homes, and most of those homes have fenced yards, but not all. In some areas, HOAs don't permit it or restrict the type of fencing, and for some people, they prefer the aesthetic of not having a fence. So why do I bring that up? Fences, and there's one in this picture, which is a complete barrier fence, and I think Alison showed that as well. But there are many types of fences, and fences can help keep pets safe, right? They protect from the dog running out onto the driveway or the street where somebody's not paying attention and might accidentally run your pet over. There are some sad stories about that. There are other animals that might not be friendly that walk in your neighborhood, and so you're protecting your pet against that. And then to remember that not all fences are created equally. And just like little naughty Maple, dogs can be climbers or diggers, and so they can find their way out of fences. I have a funny story about a raccoon, which maybe I'll talk about next. So the other thing fences can try to help do is keep other animals out. Now that might work for the domestic dog that's walking by or other, but it doesn't usually keep wildlife out. And most of us enjoy seeing wildlife. We enjoy seeing the deer that comes in, even if they eat your roses and they only eat one, so it looks uneven when you have a row of 5. Coyote can be harmful as far as they've taken small pets, cats and dogs from the yard. They'll take chicken. Raccoons will take chickens. They are also very destructive of overground water features. Bobcats, again, can harm smaller pets. So keep in mind that fences, while they might keep your animal in, may not keep other animals out. And this is especially true with underground fences. So underground fences, for many people, they can be scary because the dogs in the yard can come bark at the dogs outside the yard, and people don't know that they're barriered. So just keep those things in mind. You don't want your neighbors angry. These are all animals that we've seen in our yard, and in addition, occasionally a mountain lion and occasionally a bear in our neighborhoods, and we live right in town. So because of the irrigation canals and ditches, you often have wildlife in the area, and wildlife poses some considerations. So the first is physical danger, and the picture of the dog with the wound on the head, that's only part of the wounds caused by a mountain lion. Right? And then there's diseases. Just before that, let me tell you a funny story. In our old house, we had a Jack Russell. That was the picture on the first slide, and I'll show him maybe again. And he was a really good terrier. But because terriers have a reputation of digging and climbing, we did a kennel with a 6-foot chain link fence and buried it underground as well. Well, that was great for the dog, but guess what? The raccoons climbed over that fence and came through the dog door and would periodically eat the food and make a mess of the water and then leave. And of course, Truman, our dog, would hear it in the night and go barking after these. And it really got me nervous because I didn't want him exposed to the raccoons. So we put a cover over this kennel, a chain link cover with supports. And the raccoons were so mad, they'd come and they'd sit on the top and they'd shake that cover and try to bend it. So I'm not a huge fan of raccoons. They also would destroy our overground water feature. So Again, some people like having them, other people don't. So consider how you might manage your fencing and your water features, which we'll talk about for them. So then back to the diseases. I'll only mention a few, and some of these are zoonotic, which means they can also be transmitted to people. But for this purpose, it's about keeping your pets safe. So rabies can be transmitted through saliva and bite wounds, and bats, which are mammal, skunks, raccoons, fox, coyote, any of the land mammals can transmit it to your dogs and cats. So that's something to keep in mind. And there are vaccines, of course, for rabies, and to register your animal in Larimer County, you will need that. Plague is another one that I think most people are familiar with, transmitted by fleas, and those cute little prairie dogs are often the host for those fleas, and then they transmit to both cats and dogs. So we will get clients bring in their cat for just not doing right, fevers, gland swelling, etc. And so plague is another disease, Yersinia pestis, that can be transmitted. Two others that I wanted to mention. One has been in the news quite a bit, and that's tularemia. Rabbits can be a host, and they die from it as well. And deer flies or ticks can transmit this disease. So we have had an overrun of rabbits since the foxes disappeared from Fort Collins a few years ago. They're starting to come back, so fingers crossed. But that has caused a problem. They also die of another disease, the rabbits, sort of a hemorrhagic gastroenteritis, but they can carry tularemia. That also is a zoonotic disease. Leptospirosis is the other one, and that can be transmitted from contact with urine from possum, raccoon, etc. And so the picture on the lower right is of a fox drinking out of a pond in someone's yard. And that same fox might then urinate in the yard. And, if your yard's absorbent and it gets rid of it quickly, that's probably not as big a deal. But in our neighborhoods, which have other animals circulating, it is something to be aware of. I put vaccinate in the top right, left corner, because especially rabies and leptospirosis both have vaccines that can help minimize the transmission to your pet. There are other tick-borne diseases, and as climate change is becoming more and more of a reality, we are likely to have some of these come into our area. Recently, we had a case of a tick-borne disease that wasn't seen here before in a dog with no travel history. Typically, it's travel history, like went to Texas or somewhere else where these diseases are more prevalent, but we have had it here. So Ehrlichia, Babesia, Lyme disease, which I think a lot of people know about, transmitted by a tick. So again, when you have that potential in your yard, be aware of that and consider using preventatives for ticks and fleas, especially in the spring to summer months when the climate is warmer. Another one that I wanted to mention is avian influenza. Again, it's been in the news a lot. So the highly pathogenic avian influenza has been in the news. Lots of chicken flocks have been sort of cleared, as it were. Bird-to-bird transmission can occur. So your wild birds might bring it into your chickens if you have pet chickens. So that's something to consider for chicken safety. Dogs and cats, however, can also become infected through various mechanisms. So respiratory droplets, and then for those who don't actually go outside, I just thought I'd share unpasteurized milk, raw meat are also, so if you feed raw diets, be aware and be careful and make sure they're pasteurized or from a reputable source. Bird feces is also a way that they can be transmitted. So that cat that has a bird in its mouth, which has its own set of problems, and we'll mention that, but cats are more likely to get this disease because of the fact that they do hunt. And so when that happens, there was a news story, I think just the last couple days, where out of 10 or 11 cats, only one survived. So be aware of that, and it's probably because people don't recognize it early enough. So the early symptoms could be redness of the eyes, some lethargy and inappetence, some discharge from the eyes, and sneezing, but it can progress towards convulsions, coma, and death. So something that if you suspect this, make sure your veterinarian tests for it and then can at least provide supportive care to help reduce the chances of a sad outcome. While we're talking about viruses and bacteria, I thought the other thing I should mention is, in addition to wildlife seeking water from overground ponds or etc. in your yards, and raccoons being destructive, consider that standing water is a breeding ground for mosquitoes. So mosquitoes, and you go, okay, we know that, and most people know West Nile is transmitted through mosquitoes as a human pathogen. It also can affect other species. But more typical and more common for us would be heartworm. Heartworms are transmitted through mosquitoes, and dogs typically are the animal that gets it, and then these large worms form and can be deadly disease. There are preventatives for heartworm. So again, if your dog's outside and you have potentially standing water, then you might want to make sure that your dog is on a preventative. So there's the pond on the upper right, but even small water features, if you have them, bubblers are a good idea. Usually, if you turn the water over every 7 days, the larvae get drowned, so they don't surface and fly off as mosquitoes. Now, ideally, I wouldn't wait 7 days, but because it's a constant cycle, but running water pumps or having the water move is a good idea. An alternate strategy to above ground water is to have a rock feature with that underground pool. Now they can still stagnate, but if you run these fountains on top, then they can help. And just don't forget, containers with saucers under them also have standing water. It's why we put them under the plants to help contain the water, indoors mostly, but even outdoors, and they can be a source of mosquito spawning. Okay, now to a little bit more of the fun side. Gardens provide beauty and food to nourish us, and this attracts wildlife. It attracts birds to the garden, which most of us enjoy, and animals. And while we may not all be fans of squirrels shredding the bark on our trees or rabbits entering the yard, many people do really appreciate having wildlife. My husband tells me constantly as I chase the rabbits off the yard that we have to share with nature. So going with that, domestic cats will often harm birds. So if you're trying to build a backyard habitat to attract birds, keep that in mind and consider whether your neighborhood cats might come wandering. The city ordinance says that cats must be under some kind of a restraint if outside, but I think most of us know many people let their cats inside and out. The other thing I wanted to share is both if you plant catnip, and we know Maple likes it, but cats also like catnip, or was that catmint? But catnip is something planted for cats. They love it. They get a little bit high or euphoric on it, but consider that it will attract cats to the yard. If you have sandboxes for your children or other types of features with sand in it, remember cats quite enjoy coming to it and using it as their litter box. I actually had this happen in my old yard. And when cats eat birds, they can get toxoplasmosis. And it eat rodents as well. So they can get toxoplasmosis. And toxoplasmosis is a zoonotic disease that is not a good thing for either pregnant women or immunocompromised people. So if you have that circumstance, you probably don't want to attract cats to your yard. If you love cats and you have this, then the caution is if you do have a cat, even if you're cleaning the litter box, ideally don't have a pregnant person do it. But if you do happen to be the only one able to clean the litter box, then clean it right away, because the parasite takes about 1 to 5 days to become active after the poop's cleaned, left the body. So just that's such a little tip if you have to clean a litter box. Okay. Now to the plants, because that's what everybody really wants to hear about, since it's Petals and Paws. So plants, and Alison mentioned that plants with spines, thorns, etc., are not generally animal or people friendly. So here are just a few examples. The cacti are the obvious ones, agave and cacti, many of the desert plants that do actually grow here and can be quite beautiful. But if you have pets that want to explore the yard, maybe fence it or keep it somehow separated from those animals, because these are really hard. I actually have had a pet with cactus spines in his foot, and they were really hard to get out. And one I don't think we ever did, because his foot would periodically swell up and we'd have to soak it and try to get the infection out of there. But even trees like hawthorns, shrubs like barberries, and roses, which are beautiful in the landscape, have thorns on them, so spines or thorns. So be aware that those can cause some harm and to your pet. And again, Alison mentioned grassons or foxtails, and here are just a couple of pictures. The one on the left is in the ear, the one on the right on the top is a foot, but they often get intranasal and then have to be removed from there. And the worst of it is if they begin to migrate. You didn't pick it up, they enter, and we have had major surgeries done in the chest and the abdomen looking for a grasson or foxtail that has migrated and caused an infection. And they are really hard to find, and the infection can be really rampant if that happens. So that's something, even if you're hiking, just to be aware of. Most of us like to plant fruits and vegetables that can be eaten, and we enjoy sharing it with neighbors, etc. So there are a few that I thought maybe I should mention are potentially toxic to dogs and cats. Onions, garlic, and anything in that family can cause oxidative damage to red blood cells and various types of anemia. So they are generally, if an animal decides to dig them up and try to eat them, that could be bad. But even if you're cooking, if you gave a little piece of an onion, that's probably not going to hurt them. But if they consumed a fair bit, then that's something to be aware could be a problem. Rhubarb, many of us like to grow rhubarb, and they have oxalate crystals in their leaves and can cause kidney damage. You'll see animals get thirsty, maybe have vomiting and diarrhea, but that can then progress to renal disease and failure. Grapes, especially the Vitis species of grapes, they have a tartaric acid that also causes kidney failure. And it's variable as to the effect, because you'll hear people say, oh, my dog eats grapes all the time and nothing happens. Raisins similarly. Well, it seems to be not only type of grape, but when it's harvested or when they get to it, how ripe it is, the type of grape. And then some dogs seem to be more resistant than others, because I actually had a dog that ate the grapes off our vines and never seemed to have a problem. This was before it was a known thing. So again, a lot of these toxins have GI signs first, vomiting, diarrhea, maybe drooling if the toxin is irritant, and then followed by things like renal failure. Green tomatoes I thought was interesting. They have some things called solanine in them, and they can be toxic to dogs. When they're ripe, they're not a problem, but when they're green, they can be. And then avocados, which we don't grow here, but many of us like and eat, also have a toxin that can cause problems for dogs. So those are the vegetables and fruit, just some of them. And then just mentioning some other poisonous plants, and I'll give you some resources afterwards, because there's no way to go through all of them, and there are a lot of them. So datura or Jimson weed, beautiful flowers. A lot of people like growing them. All parts of this plant are toxic. They have alkaloids in them that I can tell you names of them, things like hyoscyamine and scopolamine, which some of you may recognize as the motion sickness patch, atropine, but they can have drooling, weakness, change in behavior, wide pupils, disorientation, and abdominal pain as symptoms or signs that the animal's eaten that. Castor bean, it's an annual here. It's beautiful. You can have plants in different colors, and then they produce castor beans, that's in the hand in the picture there. This has a neurotoxin, ricin, and highly, highly toxic, and very little needs to be eaten to be toxic. I probably foolishly grew this in my garden in a container, but when we didn't have pets, it was okay. Now we have a dog again, and probably won't do that again. I learned how toxic it was. I thought, oh dear. But here are some that you might not think of, and they are toxic. So mentioned onions, and most alliums, so bulbs in the onion family, have the same potential. But other bulbs, so all our fun daffodils, hyacinths, tulips, fall crocus, colchicums, all contain alkaloids of some kind. So you might imagine the colchicum has colchicine, the tulip has tulipoline. These actually have bigger chemical names behind them, like alpha methylene, butyronol, lactone, but we don't need that. So they can all cause toxins if the toxicity, if the dogs dig them up and eat them. It tends to be concentrated in the bulb or corm. So drooling, vomiting, diarrhea, trembling, abdominal pain, on it goes. So again, just if you have a dog that's a curious one and wants to dig and eat, just be aware of that. Other bulbs have cardiac glycosides. These are toxins that can cause cardiac arrhythmias. And lily of the valley, the lower white, beautiful little plant, and bluebells up on the top right both have these cardiac glycosides. So they are definitely more life-threatening if an animal were to eat enough of it. And then there are other plants that also have this toxin, and foxglove or digitalis is one. It's usually biennial flowering, I think that's the right word. In addition to cardiac changes, because of the heart failing, you can see weakness, vomiting, diarrhea, etc. So those are definitely poisonous in the landscape and known. But there are really many other garden plants that have toxins and symptoms as previously mentioned, so diarrhea, vomiting, etc., drooling. But some can also cause skin irritation depending on the compound. So geraniums have geraniol, and they can cause skin irritation if an animal rubs up against enough of them. And now they're scented geraniums, and many of us like those, but those scents are coming from some of those compounds. So something to consider. And again, nausea, vomiting, etc., a sign. Lilies, I think most people have heard that they are highly toxic to cats, and any part of them. And if pollen goes on the cats and then they groom them, that too can cause toxicity. They start again with gastrointestinal signs, but progress to renal failure. And so you can have a sadly dead cat in a short period of time. But I didn't put near all the plants that are toxic on here, but you can see that many of these are common garden plants we grow here in Colorado in our landscape. I tried to focus on Colorado plants. I didn't go to all the plants, but that's something to consider. And if you wanted to look this up further, you could look up fda.gov, and in Animal Veterinary, you can look up your plant, but lovely lilies is one of the topics in there, and you can find more information on lilies with that. So as I did this myself, I realized that I have almost all these plants in my yard, fairly big yard, and I have a dog, and we have cats come in the neighborhood, and we don't have a fence. So I actually talked to Tony Knight, who's one of the experts in poisonous plants and was a master gardener here in Colorado till he moved to Tucson. And he said dose is a huge component. So dose makes the toxin, except for a few plants, maybe castor beans and the lily for cats. So when you're out there in your yard, watch your dogs. Don't leave them unattended if they are curious and do like to nibble on things. Play with them, whether it's a laser light for a cat or, retrieving toys for a dog, so that they don't have the need to go explore or chase the squirrels or eat the rabbits or whatever else they might choose to do on a given day. So here it's Dr. Tony Knight's book, if people are interested. And then many years ago, he created this website here at CSU. It's now managed by one of my colleagues, Dr. Dawn Duval. But it is a wealth of information, and you can click on a plant and find out much more information on each of those plants. So another resource for those who want them. And with that, I'll say thank you. This is my backyard. That is the castor bean plant in the container. And you can see I have colchicums, tulips, hydrangea, various other plants that I just told you were toxic, growing there quite happily. Luckily, our dog doesn't eat plants, but this is our old dog, Truman, who thought water gardens were actually quite fun. And this was in a different house, but I hope you got something out of that, and I know Alison and I will be happy to take questions if you have them.
Thank you both so much. Alison already responded to this question in the chat, but Trisha had asked, I read that applying pelletized gypsum to your lawn helps repair dog damage, and I'm wondering if that's true. Alison said that that's recommended to neutralize the urine, but gypsum is lime, and Colorado soils have a lot of lime naturally. Adding more is not a good idea, and that's why leaching with water is a better option. And I was also just curious, I have a puppy who likes to get into like my old dead plants, and I know like he was grabbing a geranium, dried stem of a geranium the other day. Does something like that have the potential to cause skin irritation as well?
My guess is, I don't know the answer to that right off, but my guess is the live plant that's producing the oils is more likely, but if there's some stored in the stems or leaves that the dog goes after, could cause skin irritation. I wouldn't be surprised if it did, so.
Okay, great. And I don't know if anybody else has any last minute questions. That's all that we have up right now. Give it just another second. Thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you both for being here and presenting. It's so wonderful and informative to get to hear all that. I'm excited for gardening coming up now.
Thanks.
And I'll do a shameless disclaimer that if you do have questions, reach out to either the Larimer County Extension Office, Weld County Extension Office, wherever you're living. Myself, Khursheed, the other Master Gardener volunteers, we are always happy to help you. So please do use those resources.
Thanks.
Michelle said, thank you. This was so informative. I have 2 large dogs who love to play in the backyard, and we are trying to figure out what to replace the muddy dirt with. Toby is a havoc dog. We love CSU Extension.
Thanks.
Yeah, and if you want to have a longer chat, Michelle, I'm happy to do that.
Right.
And there's many master gardeners on here, so thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. It was great.
Thanks.